So today I want to do a build breakdown of my 2010 Ford Ranger with a Mercedes turbo diesel OM606 in it. I wanted to give some context to the build, the why I built it, the how I built it, the story as to how I found the engine. They're not exactly easy to find, and I think that I have a pretty interesting story to that, of how I got this engine and even a spare. So this is going to be a longer video. If you're only interested in the engine or the transmission or certain parts of it, please take a look at the chapters. You can skip to wherever you want. But if you want the whole story of it, the whole context, then stick around, we'll get into it, and I'll tell you the story on it. So the story actually starts with a different vehicle than this Ranger. It actually goes back to a 2000 Cherokee that I had, and I wanted to go fast. So I actually had a turbo 4-liter build that I was about 70% done with. Turbo mounted, it was in the Jeep. I had an AX15 behind it, blah, blah, blah. Well, one night I'm scrolling through Marketplace, as one does, and I found a really good deal on an OM606. Actually, two of them. And I had seen videos of this engine. You can look on YouTube all over, and there's, overseas in Europe and Russia, a lot of people can make good power with these engines without having to open them up. That's what I really liked, is that the factory long block could handle a lot of power. They could be mechanical, and it looked like a fun engine. So I ended up ditching the 4-liter setup and went out to Chicago to buy an entire storage unit of OM606 parts. So we get out to Chicago and meet this guy in the middle of the night at his storage unit, and he opens it up, and there are totes of 606 parts and two engines, transmissions, all these different parts, turbos, and somebody thinking that, they're just OM606 parts. They're not necessarily that easy to find. In the States, to my knowledge, we only had a turboed 98 and 1999. They came in the E300 TDs of Mercedes. I know that we had them non-turboed, I think in 1993 till 99 at least, maybe 2000. So they're not exactly easy to find these turbo parts for them. And the blocks are slightly different. The rods are different. The cams are different. I believe the heads are slightly different between the naturally aspirated to the turbos. So I really wanted the turbo setup and engine so that I didn't have to change it all up. So I get to the guy's storage unit in the middle of the night, and we make a deal. He's showing me all the parts. There's a known good motor, roughly around 200,000, he thinks. He removed it from the car, and he had a manual swap behind it. Came with another motor that I was told that had rod knock. I've never looked further into it. It's just my spare motor. So I have these two engines, long blocks, valve cover to oil pan, and then a couple transmissions. He actually manual swapped the E300 that he had these engines in. And the way he did that was he took the automatic bell housing from the factory transmission, he chopped it in half, and then he took an AR5 out of a Pontiac Solstice, and he cut that bell housing in half, welded them together. He had like an adapter to go from the Mercedes 8-bolt flywheel, I believe, to like a normal 6-bolt flywheel for that Pontiac. Then he had Pontiac flywheel and Pontiac clutch with the input and everything. It could have worked. I never put it in the car. He told me it worked. It was a pretty interesting setup. I ended up selling that off later on down the line, but I did put it in the Cherokee when I got it back. So I pick up those up. We come back from Chicago. It fit in an 8-foot truck bed. This wasn't a huge storage unit, so it all fit in an 8-foot truck bed. But it was a lot of parts for, if you know what OM606s go for, look on eBay. It was about half of what one complete engine goes for, and I got all of these parts. So it was a really good deal that I was able to drive out there and go get it. So we get back, and I rip the 4-liter out. I sell that off out of the XJ. And then I built some mounts and put the OM606 in there. I had the AR5 behind it. And my plan was that the AR5 is in the same family as a Jeep AX15. So I was going to end up having a 4-wheel drive OM606. There's some roadblocks that kept me from doing that. So I ended up selling that off. Well, my whole intention was to go fast. And then I got introduced to drifting. So I had the idea that I was going to drift this Jeep Cherokee this straight axle, front straight axle Jeep Cherokee. I was going to build, an independent front suspension or figure out how to get a lot of angle out of the front straight axle. Well, I kind of played with that idea for a while and decided that I wanted something already with independent front suspension that I could just build off of from there. So again, ditching this project, I took the OM606 out of that Cherokee. I sold off the Cherokee. That's what brings us to this 2010 Ranger. At the time, I was daily driving a 2011 Ford Ranger, and I wanted one of that specific year, 08 to 2011. They're rear disc brakes. They are independent front suspension, steering rack, a little bit nicer front end. I like the design of this front end, and a little bit nicer interior. So I found this on Marketplace one day for $1,000. It was posted for. Didn't run. The pictures were it off into the weeds in the woods. The guy posted up for $1,000. I think his sister was the one that posted it. So it was one of those sketchy, like, call my brother deals. Well, I followed through. I called her brother, and he said, yep, I got it. It doesn't run. It's over in the woods. Come look at it. So I hooked up my trailer, and I headed out to go look at this Ranger in the woods. I show up, and of course it's in the woods at the end of this guy's long driveway. And the story is that it's an old Orkin truck. Underneath the wrap, there's still the little diamond ghosted into the paint. It's an old Orkin truck that him and his mother bought, and he daily drove. It's a 2-wheel drive, 4-cylinder, 2.3 automatic Ranger. Well, he apparently wasn't very good at oil changes, or didn't believe in oil changes, didn't know how to do oil changes. Couldn't really get to the end of that story. But he was daily driving the truck. He had gone to the auto parts store, and there was oil and a filter in the bed of the truck. On his way home to do the oil change, the engine decided that it had enough and sent 3 rods to the oil pan and left him stranded on the side of the road. He had it towed to the end of his driveway and didn't touch it for 2 or 3 years. So here we are. It doesn't run. Decently clean truck. It's not rust free, but decently clean for Michigan. So we made a deal. I ended up picking it up for $800. I load it up into my trailer, and I bring it on home. So I get it back home, and me and my buddy pulled out the 4-cylinder, the 2.3 that was in this truck, the blown up one, ripped that out of there, and immediately had the OM606 swapped into it, just put in there, mocked up in the engine bay to even see if it would fit in there. The 6-cylinder is quite long for this engine bay. Ideally, I would have done like an OM605, which is the 5-cylinder version, but we didn't get that in the States, and I really didn't want to import one. So I built some motor mounts from the OM606 that went to the factory 4-cylinder motor mounts on the frame. So I built steel motor mounts for that. And then at the time, I still had the AR5 set up. So I had that sitting in the truck, and then I built a trans mount for it. So going along with this, I wanted to obviously lower the truck and build it into what was supposed to be a drift truck. So my plan was, again, to take the hard way, to drift a Ranger. And I was going to build some custom knuckles, if not custom control arms and knuckles and the angle kit, and be able to drift the Ranger, even though I've never drifted it ever. And I'm going to build the hardest truck to get drifting. So anyways, I ended up buying a DJM lowering kit for this truck. I installed that. I have Caltrax in the rear. So I have all this on the truck. I bought these wheels, not as you see them, but I bought them off Marketplace for a pretty good deal. Again, scrolling at midnight, lowballed the guy. He took them. I went out and picked them up, and they are off an LS400. That's what the specs are for, but I did adapt them to work with this truck pretty well. And I'll go over the specs of these wheels later on in the video when we go around suspension and the wheels and tires. So I have this truck sitting there, cab on frame. I did pull the bed off. The bed had a little rod up front, so I pulled that off. And I was showing it off to one of my other buddies, and he's a painter. So he walks in, showing him, I'm all excited. He's happy for me. He's excited. And he says, well, while you're at it, you might as well just paint the frame. Frame had a little bit of, surface rust on it, usual stuff for Michigan. Nothing bad, nothing rotted out. Now, little context to that. I had built another truck a few years before and I painted the frame. I didn't do it properly. I never had good success with it. It always flaked off. So I really didn't want to paint it. So I said, well, if I'm going to do anything with the frame, I'm going to powder coat it. So this is where the story turns into, while I'm in there, goes way too far. So I decided I'm going to powder coat the frame. That means that everything has to come off. The OM606 came out, the cab came off, all of the suspension got blown off of it, every nut and bolt gone, just a bare frame. So I loaded it up. I took it to a sandblaster who had a big enough cabinet to do a frame. He blasted it. I picked it up from there and I took it straight to the powder coater who did an epoxy coat, top coat of satin black paint on it. So I picked that up and brought it back, and I was going to build the truck up to what you see today. But I couldn't put, a rusty 170,000 mile cab back on this beautiful frame that I have. So I decided to paint the engine bay, replace the core support that had some rust at the bottom. So that's completely replaced that with an OEM one from the dealership. Completely stripped the underside of the truck, rust prevented it, fixed all the rust, undercoated it, made it look all pretty. Same thing with the bed. I fixed all the rust up front, undercoated it all, put it back on the frame, put the OM606 in there, but of course I can't put a 200,000 mile looking engine, so that got all stripped down to the factory long block. I resealed it, I repainted it, and then I had at this time already decided to swap what transmission setup I was going to put in the truck. So I ended up getting an adapter kit and a CD009 out of a Nissan 350Z to put into this truck. So now we've come up to where it is. The truck was still white, not wrapped. So now I'm going to show you the engine setup and exactly what I have done to that, the turbo injection pump, and we'll get into that now. So this is a 1998 or 1999 Mercedes OM606 turbo diesel. As I stated before, it's I think around 200,000 miles is what the bottom end long block head has on it. And all I really did to it for the engine itself was when I had it out and I was painting the engine bay and I wanted to paint the engine, I resealed everything. I resealed the water pump, all the common areas. Oil pan got resealed, the rear main seal got replaced. Everything besides the head gasket. This is still, to my knowledge, the factory head gasket. Never been replaced before with the factory head bolts. Going into modifications, I have a diesel pump UK 8.5 mil OM603 injection pump. Now this makes it completely mechanical. There are no ECUs on this whole truck. So to tune this, all I need is a 10 millimeter wrench. And it's just nut and bolt, like a Cummins 12 valve to just control how much fuel is going into it. There's also a boost reference that allows more fuel when it comes into boost. This is a maxed out, as of now, as big as you can get for a stock casting OM603 Bosch injection pump. And I've had no real issues with it. Once I get it tuned and you get it dialed in, it's a great pump. I'm not sponsored by Diesel Pump UK. I paid full retail for this and imported it, paid all the duty fees. It's a great pump. Also, on the other side of the engine, I have this turbo manifold. Now, this is a Kangaroo's Team T3 cast manifold that I imported and then replaced obviously the exhaust gasket with a factory Mercedes-Benz one. And then I also replaced all the studs and the nuts for that. And I've had really good success with that. Besides getting some surface rust on it, I have no complaints about it. Strapped to that is a off-brand eBay turbo because I never expected it was supposed to be a temporary turbo. Otherwise, I would have spent more money on a Borg, Garrett, something like that. But this is, I believe, a precision clone 6262 turbo T3. So I wanted to max out the turbo and have room to grow with fuel. I wanted my turbo to limit me to what the rods in this engine are known to handle. So it's a 62 millimeter compressor, 62 turbine. We've had great success. It has a slight lag, but it's really fun to drive. It's not super laggy. It's not a big 369 turbo that a lot of people run with this injection pump that can be super laggy and super smoky. So I've had great success with that turbo, and I sized it to this to be able to do everything that I wanted to do. And one of two most common issues with this engine, to my understanding, is the crank pulley. Now, these engines create a lot of torque, and the serpentine belt drive and all of that, the pulley has a keyway on there, but it's known to be able to snap that. Plus, the crank pulley bolt has some ridiculous torque spec of 400 something foot-pounds. For insurance, I pinned this crank, and you drill a hole. There's a special tool for it so that you can align the drill, and then you press in a hardened steel pin into it, so you have two ways of keeping that pulley from shifting. Plus, you're also relying off that pulley for your timing, so you really don't want that shifting one way or the other. So that's pinned, no issues with that. Brand new bolt, put that all together. This is still a factory harmonic balancer, not a fluid dampener or anything like that. I've never seen a need for it. For an indirect injected motor, it runs relatively smooth. So this engine, when it came out of the E300, those are front sump setups. What I did, and also came in the tote from the storage unit and all that, is this is a OM648, which is the common rail generation after the 606 that we got in the States. So it's an OM648 rear sump conversion. So you use the OM648 oil pump, the pan itself, the pickup tube, and it all bolts up to the block of the OM606. I painted it, I made it look nice, resealed it. Original oil pump, no idea how many miles are on it. Put that in with the pickup tube. I also deleted the oil level sensor with a block off plate that I got mine from Diesel Pump UK when I imported other stuff, but you can get it from numerous other manufacturers, especially in the States. So the other secondary common issue with these engines is the coolant mod, as I refer to them. So also common with like Cummins and things like that, the number 6 cylinder gets pretty hot. The coolant flow doesn't get the coolant back from cylinder 6 as efficiently as it could, so you typically have a lot of issues on cylinder 6. So there's a mod where you drill and tap the water pump to accept a hose, and then you go from there all the way to a plug in the coolant system near cylinder 6. So that relieves the pressure in cylinder 6 so that I can get back up front, go through the water pump, go back through the radiator, and get cooled as efficiently as possible. All right, so I'm going to go over a few other things in the engine bay. That pretty much sums up the engine itself and what I have done to that. Starting over in the driver's side, this is a factory HVAC box. This vehicle does not have AC, unfortunately. I had to cut the HVAC box and plastic weld a sheet on there so that I could fit the turbo and the exhaust down and around stuff. So I had to give up AC, but this does have heat. And then coming alongside here, I have 3 chase bay options. I have the washer fluid conversion from them, works great. I also have the coolant overflow from them. And then tucked down here in the corner is the crankcase vent, which comes off here, and that just vents to atmosphere. As you can see, I need to improve upon that because it comes out of the filter here and goes right into the turbo. So it is a Bluetooth PCV system that just eventually just goes back into the engine anyways. Moving along here, I also have a tucked radiator. There's no off-the-shelf options for a tucked radiator for these Rangers. It's a universal 24-inch core radiator that I had slightly modified to be able to work in here. So that's tucked into the core support, and that's the only way, without going into the firewall and modifying that I was able to fit this 6-cylinder engine in here efficiently. And in front of that, I have a 3-inch core intercooler for the turbo system. And then below that, I'm just going to point it out right now, is this Mishimoto oil cooler, 24-inch oil cooler that's mounted down there that is plumbed into the oil filter housing that opens on the factory thermostat. Along here, I deleted a lot of the factory stuff, if you can't tell. And I also stripped all the wiring of everything that I didn't need. This had ABS at one point, that's gone. Everything that I didn't need is stripped of the wiring harnesses. They were re-loomed, and I kind of routed them a little bit better way that I wanted. Ideally, I could have tucked them, outside the fenders and made it look really clean. I run most of the factory fuse block over here with all the circuits that I did keep. I also have a vacuum solenoid over here. This is how I shut down the engine. I apply vacuum to the top of the injection pump diaphragm, and it shuts off the fuel. And then I have a vacuum distribution block over here that runs off the factory vacuum pump on the OM606, and that's all plumbed together. Also here in the corner, driver's side, I have a booster delete. This is a chase bay setup. I think that is meant for an IS300 that I was able to fit in here, slightly modify the holes, be able to fit that in, modify it to work with this brake pedal. That works great. I really have no complaints. The pedal is pretty firm, but it's not a daily driver. I enjoy it. Some people love it, some people hate it. Below that, I have a line lock for doing big smoky burnouts when I don't have an open diff and do one wheel peels. I should probably mention the power steering pump. So this is a factory Mercedes-Benz power steering pump. I had it plumbed into the Ford steering rack. I had adapters, an adapter to go to AN line off the pump for the high pressure. I had a custom hydraulic line made, and then I welded 2 AN bungs to the factory steel lines coming out of the steering rack, and then just a low pressure tube back to the power steering pump. It's worked great. There's no cooler or anything. Never had a single issue. So now we're going to go from the engine and we're going to go back to the transmission and talk about that and the setup that I have for that. So underneath the truck, to look at the transmission, this is a CD009 out of a 0607 350Z. It's been fully rebuilt with all Nissan parts, new synchros, new bearings, thrust washers, all of that. We have a DJM adapter kit for it to go to the 606, factory master or slave cylinder down here. And the adapter kit also includes a custom aluminum flywheel that keeps the 606 starter ring, so we can just use a regular starter for it. And then it goes to a Sachs pressure plate and then their clutch disc as well. Then moving back, we have the mid-mount shifter up top as well to be able to get the shifter where it is in the truck and make it somewhat comfortable for shifting in a regular cab. As well, moving down, we have just a factory replacement Nissan 350Z trans mount, and then I made this custom bracket mount to go to the Ford Ranger frame, and I just welded some nuts into the frame and made it very simple. We have some flat stock that made this mount easy, try and keep it simple. And then that allows us to run a 1350 drive shaft. So I still have the Nissan 350Z dust cover on the back of this transmission, and then a local shop made me this drive shaft. It's 1350 joints front and back. And then in the back here, I have a billet adapter to go to the Ford flange in the back. You don't need billet, but it's all they had on short notice, and I needed this drive shaft for an event that I wanted to go to with the truck. And then bringing us back to the rear axle, this is the factory original axle that was in this truck. It is a 7.5-inch ring gear, 410 final drive. It is a factory disc brake truck. Another reason why I wanted to get a later model Ranger. Still an open differential that needs to be changed in the future. I do have an 8.8 to put into this with an LSD as well. And then we have a DJM 5-inch drop kit. So it's a flip kit moving the axle from underneath the leaf springs to on top with their U-bolts and U-bolt plate. Mine is changed out for this Caltrac plate because I have Caltrac's traction bars that work really well on this truck. Then we have DJM's monotube shocks as well on the rear end here. Very simple. It's a nice drop. It rides quite well. I did have to cut my bump stops because I don't have a C-notch in the frame yet, but that'll come in the future as well. And then moving more back, we have the bottom side of my 16-gallon fuel cell. It is a rear sump cell. I have a feed and return line going into the back of it, which comes over here to a Bosch 044 fuel pump. And that is feeding the Dash 6 AN line that goes all the way along the frame rail here. With custom brake lines as well as the wiring that was stripped down for this frame and comes all the way up front back to the engine up top there going to the factory fuel filter housing. And then I have the return coming off the injection pump going all the way back to the tank, and then I also have a separate return line for the injector return all the way back to the tank as well. And then up front here, suspension wise, is the other half of the DJM kit. This is a 4-inch drop up front by 2-inch coil drop, and then these DJM lower tubular arms which drop the coil 2 inches further down, giving you 4 inches. I also have their tubular upper control arms as well. Comes with their sway bar end links. Pretty nice kit. I like it. It rides really nice. Pretty much close to as factory as you can get on a lower truck. As you can see, I still have the factory knuckles and disc brakes and everything. So I had hinted earlier to this needing to be a drift truck. It is not a drift truck. It didn't end up getting set up to be a drift truck or custom suspension or anything like that made. When I was going through and powder coating the frame and doing all this work to the underside and painting everything, making it look nice, it turned more into a cruiser slash show truck that I didn't really want to drift. but I do have a additional drift vehicle now, an actual Fox body that we built. Maybe we'll do a video on that in the future. But for now, back to the truck. We have the DJM kit and custom brake lines throughout. This is a factory steering rack. Everything is pretty much factory from there. It's a really simple setup on the truck. It works, but I'm looking to improve upon it. So in phase 2, we'll redo quite a bit here on the bottom side to make this truck even better. All right, so I wanted to go over the wheel specs and how to get them to fit on a Ranger. They're a little difficult sometimes depending on your wheel. So up front, I have 18 by 10 inch wheels with a negative 25 offset. And then to get them to fit on a Ranger, because the 2-wheel drive hubs are too large, they want a larger center bore, and I wasn't interested in machining this one out. So in order to get these to fit, I have 1.5-inch spacers to adapt these to the Ranger, and that spaces out the wheel enough to get past that hub. It also gives me the stance that I have on the truck that I'm quite happy with. So I also have these wrapped in a 265/35 Kenda tire up front, and then we'll switch over to the back and talk about those. Okay, so in the rear, we have 18 inches as well. They're 11 inches wide, and then the same negative 25 millimeter offset. And to get them to fit onto this Ranger, at least for the stance that I want, I have 3/4 inch spacer on this side to be able to get it to adapt. Now, Ford from the factory actually offset the rear axle 3/4 of an inch to the passenger side for whatever reason. So when I first put these on, the passenger side was sticking out farther than the driver's side when I had 1.5 inches on both sides. So I offset that by putting a 3/4 inch spacer on this side. And then on the driver's side, I actually have an 1.5 inch spacer to be able to get the wheels in the same area and the wheel well and the same stance and everything. And then I have these tires, these 285/35 tires in the rear, and these are NT05s. And this truck doesn't really have any traction issues. So this was a large enough tire to get the power down and have some fun. Okay, so let's get into the interior on this Ranger. I'm going to start with the seats and the brackets. So these are NRG bucket seats. I use the NRG brackets as well and actually have those attached to the factory Ford Ranger sliders and floor brackets. It works pretty good. You're quite high up in the cab, so I would like to change that in the future, but it made it very easy to get the correct seat position, and theoretically anybody could drive the truck, but I would have just done a normal seat bracket and solid mounted the seat so that you're a little bit lower in the cab. Also, this truck was a vinyl floor truck because it's an XL trim, so it was base model. So I replaced that with black aftermarket carpet and the mats. For aftermarket carpet, it fits okay, and then you just trim and cut out all your holes. The mats fit nicely. Very happy with that. And then in the center there on the transmission, I have a weighted shift knob, and then below that is just a universal like Alcantara shifter cover. That was kind of supposed to be a temporary fix, but it's stuck around this long. And then moving up to the steering wheel, a deep dish steering wheel there on an NRG steering wheel adapter meant for these Rangers. Pretty easy to get. And then I have the aux beam there where the radio used to be. So there is no stereo in this truck. I typically just carry a Bluetooth speaker with me when we do want music. But in the center there, we have an aux with all the switch panels. That's how I can start the truck, turn on fuel, glow plugs, the fan, line lock, and other things like that. Those have power once the key is on. That also allows everything to light up too. Moving over to the cluster. So the factory cluster is gone, and I have a set of glow shift gauges, and then I have 2 extras up there on the pillar. I have boost, I have oil temp, speedometer, tachometer, volts, fuel level, and those all go to their own individual sensors so that I can look at things on the engine without having an ECU to program and everything like that. These are just analog style. They have their own sensors, their own coolant temp sensor, and I can go with their own dedicated wiring to each one of those in the engine bay on the engine. And it works pretty good. Glow shift has some mixed reviews. People love them, people hate them. They worked really well for me. I used to have them in my other diesel trucks. They've always worked well. And that pretty much sums up the interior. It is a regular cab. There's not much in here. I wanted to keep it as basic as possible. following from the engine bay in behind the dash. I did remove every wiring that I didn't need. It's very simple behind the dash. Now that we're done with the interior, we're going to move on to other parts of the truck and show you what those look like. Okay, so starting up front here, this is the factory grille and front bumper. They're textured black on the lower base models. I have a black Ford emblem. These are also just eBay, Amazon black headlight housings. They work quite well and they go along with the theme of the truck instead of the clear and chrome ones. So below the headlight are two pod lights there that I use for fog lights. Those are controlled by the switch panel and they work really well. So these hood pins here, just black aftermarket hood pins. I tried orientating them like a GT500 style. I was really limited on which pins I could use due to the contour of the hood and where the core support is, where I could put them. So this is the best case for that. Moving on to the wrap, I'm sure you guys have noticed that the hood is gloss. The rest of the truck is satin. This color is green, black, iridescent. This company is Tech Wrap. I'm not a big fan. I'm going to rewrap it because it's failed in a lot of different areas. But the reason that the hood is gloss, my day job is dent repair and paint protection film. And we were doing paint protection film on another vehicle. We miscut the hood and I didn't want to just throw away that film. And we had already undone the release liner. The Ranger was right behind it. So we just went up and over that car and put it directly on the Ranger because instead of wasting it, I'm going to make use of it. It also kind of showed me what this color would look like in gloss, and I think the next color I'm going to do on this truck will be in gloss. They don't offer this color in gloss from this company, so it was really cool to see that like that. But I'm going to change that up and make the whole truck gloss eventually. We also have, due to one of the failure points of the wrap, in this body line, there's a matte black painted pinstripe that goes down this truck on both sides with this body line and that body line down there. Matching the green black theme, we have black Ranger badges on both fenders as well as the tailgate. And we have factory mirrors that are, I believe, 08 to 11, but another one of the reasons I went with the later model Ranger. It also came with these ABS rain guards. They're quite nice. They're my style. Not everybody likes them. And then moving on down, this is where I'm going to bring up the exhaust. So coming out the hood is the wastegate screamer pipe. It's gated at about 35 PSI, which is pretty low for these diesels. And so that'll open up and relieve off any extra pressure that makes. And then it comes off the turbo at a 3-inch downpipe, goes outside of the frame, right behind the right front tire, and then underneath the body. And it comes out here, and it transitions into a 4-inch, comes out a 4-inch teardrop that comes out the side of the bed. Really cool look. I really like this look, but diesels love to vibrate. So it rattles. Doesn't matter how much you tighten it, what mount you use, hard mounted, rubber mounted. This hole just needs to be a lot bigger for this to work on these diesels. It works really good on gassers, but this one, it just shakes and rattles. So that's something I'd like to improve down the line. And then moving along back, I'm going to point out this bed cover. This is a Lund soft tonneau cover, tri-fold. I don't know who makes them anymore, but I found this at a junkyard, paid $50 for it, and it just encapsulated the bed and makes the truck look really nice in my opinion. So, and then coming around back, I have just factory tail lights. On the tailgate, we have another black emblem. We have a factory replacement rear bumper, and then I also put the hitch on this. Don't know why I put it on a lower truck. It hits everything, but I thought that I would tow something with this, I guess. It's on there. It'll probably come off at later stages in life. So let me fold up this tonneau cover and then we'll talk about what's in the bed. So I kept it pretty simple in the bed. I didn't want a lot going on back here, but I did move a couple things. So I had the battery relocated to the bed just with a battery tray and some custom cables. That also goes to a master cutoff switch that's actually in the factory fuel filler neck area. That's just a switch that I can turn on and off, power to the entire truck. And then moving back here, I have the fuel cell that's actually right underneath the bed. It's a 16-gallon fuel cell. Just eBay fuel cell, works really nice. It has a sump on the bottom. And up top, I have the injector return line, as well as just a vent for the tank itself. So whenever I want to fill up with diesel, I just have to lower the tailgate, pop the fuel cell, fill that up. And that's pretty much all that I have going on back here. Obviously, it's not finished. This is phase 1. I would like to tidy it up for phase 2. All right, guys, I appreciate you sticking around to listen to the story of why I built this truck and how I built it. It's a really cool truck, in my opinion. If you like it as well, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up. It helps a lot. And we are going to be documenting phase 2, what we're going to be upgrading and changing about the truck. So if you'd like to see that, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and stick around for that. If you guys have any questions about the build that I didn't cover in the video, put it in the comments and we'll do our best to respond to that. But for now, I'm going to go for a drive.